Alright, my people, we've been slacking recently on the videos, but I'm telling you now, as this video is being recorded, the moment it's over, I'm recording about 2 to 3 other videos. So, you know, we're gonna have a lot of videos coming out in the next couple of days. I even have some videos in the drafts right now that I actually uploaded onto my channel, but I just never made them public because I can't lie, I wasn't bothered to do a thumbnail for it. But anyway, we're back with a 35 pokes video. I've been meaning to make some videos for this because of the fact that 35 pokes has a ladder for this month under the national dex other tiers, and the ladder's been pretty active, it's been pretty fun, and suspect test is actually going on the ladder for Bishop. I'm going to leave the mons on the side so you guys actually know which mons are actually legal on the metagame, but we have the team builder here as well, so if that also helps you out, that's also pretty good as well. But yeah, I'm going to be going over the top 5 worst Pokemon in the metagame at the moment. We're starting off the chain of 35 pokes videos with a negative video, but yeah, we're going to be talking about the worst mons in the metagame because I think everyone knows what the best Pokemon are in the metagame if you actually play the tier, but obviously opinions will differ greatly depending on who you ask. But seeing how there's only 35 Pokemon in the first place, I guess some people are going to share my sentiments in terms of what mons are actually do nothings and you know, what mons aren't doing anything in the metagame. But either way, if you guys do enjoy this video, leave a like down below, join the kingdom. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We only got 2 months left. Again, I'm very optimistic, but you know, it's good to stay optimistic, innit? But yeah, cool, we're going to be starting off with number 5 here, obviously, and my number 5 pick for the worst Pokemon in the metagame, I'm going to have to give it to Seviper. Now, unfortunately, some people are going to be like, ah, man, you know, Guzzlord should be on the list. Unfortunately, Guzzlord just about didn't make it onto the list because I see some potential in Guzzlord. Assuming if like Bishop gets banned and people are just like, oh, we need ghost answers, Guzzlord is right there, and I think its niche will become more apparent as the metagame goes on for the month. But Seviper, on the other hand, is a mon that's probably just going to stay in the same position as the metagame continues because Seviper is not an impressive mon by any standards. Unfortunately, like, that's just how it is. Stats aren't good, and this is like one of the most powerful 35 metas we've had. Like, look at this base stat total. You know, we have a lot of, you know, heavy hitting Pokemon like Snorlax, Magmortar, Blastoise. You know, like, these are Pokemon that I've seen the limelight in as the generations have gone on, and you know, Seviper doesn't even keep up with that. Like, Seviper's base stat total is measly 458. Like, even Rhydon's not fully evolved, and you know, can run Eviolite and is a lot more useful in the metagame at large. But Seviper, you look at the list of mons here and you're like, what does this thing do? What are you using Seviper for? And yeah, I haven't really seen anything impressive from it. I will be honest, I've lost to one Seviper once, but my team was not good, and you'll probably think that's an excuse, but I'm being serious. Like, I lost because I didn't expect Seviper to actually do the damage it did. The one thing I could say Seviper can do somewhat effectively, but the somewhat is very hard, is a hard somewhat, is like coil sets. It has decent coverage with Gunk Shot and Earthquake. It also has Sucker Punch as well to, you know, as a priority option to hit ghost types, and it also has Aqua Tail, so Rhydon isn't an actual like good check to it, or even Sandaconda as well. But again, Seviper is too frail. Even with a +1 defense boost, Sandaconda is gonna nuke it with Earthquake anyway. And yeah, it doesn't really have anything else. Like, it has Glare if you want to run Glare, but again, we have, do you know how many Glare mons we have out of 35? We have 4, which is actually a pretty decent ratio here, and all these mons are better than Seviper. So yeah, unfortunately, this guy does not do anything in the metagame, in my opinion, but it is number 5 because again, I've lost to it, which is a shame. I have to actually say I've lost to a Seviper, but at the same time, you know, the rest of the mons that we're going to be talking about also just do nothings, and I could see Seviper doing a lot more than them. So yeah. Alright, coming in at number 4, I unfortunately have to say it's Klinklang here. Klinklang, my favorite steel type of all time. I know a lot of people are probably going to question mark at that decision, but I do really love Klinklang, always have, always will. And yeah, unfortunately, this is just not the matter for Klinklang, unfortunately. Klinklang's biggest issue is coverage options. Like, you have Shift Gear as setup, which Shift Gear is probably one of the best setup moves in the game, because it doubles your speed and gives you an attack boost at the same time. Like, it's a like 1.5x like Dragon Dance at that point. But you know, Klinklang really suffers with coverage issues. moves. These are all the moves it has on the physical side. And this is in Nat decks, by the way, like, because Klinkang's not in Gen 9. But even in Gen 8, pretty much this was all it had, minus Return and Frustration, and pretty much everything here that probably got nuked in Gen 8. But yeah, Klinkang's lack of good coverage means it really doesn't break anything, even with a shift gear up. A lot of teams are equipped to handle Klinklang as well. Like, you're gonna shift gear, maybe not even 2 Ikiryu Sandaconda with your stab gear grind, which is 100 base power, mind you. Like, that's actually not a weak move by any means, but you know, Sandaconda's not gonna care, and then it's just gonna kill you with Earthquake. Like, unfortunately, Klinklang is just lacking in the coverage department. And I think if it had moves, you know, if it had Earthquake, if it had literally anything else other than Steel and normal type moves, you know, Klinklang would actually be a pretty good Pokemon in this format, and probably would do a lot better in the grand scheme of things competitively. But yeah, his lack of coverage really does let it down, which means that other offensive options in the tier are just outclassing it as a Steel type. Even Berserker, I'd rather use Berserker than Klinklang, due to the fact that Berserker actually has coverage. It has close combat, it has knockoff, it has U-turn, it has play rough. It has a lot of really cool options in his move pool. A shame it's so slow, but you know, I'd rather use this than Klinklang, because at least I could U-turn out of a Sandaconda coming in, I could U-turn out of a Blastoise coming in. Knockoff is the freest move in the game, and yeah, Klinklang just is lacking that sort of, you know, immediate power because his coverage options are so weak. Like, +1 Wild Charge can probably OHKO, like if you go Life Orb, this is gonna OHKO like offensive Blastoise with Wild Charge, I'll say that. But other than that, there's just like too many mons that can actually handle Klinklang pretty easily. Steel isn't really the best attacking stab in this metagame. We have other Steel types like Bishop, which I said is being suspect tested. We have Emboar, we have Berserker as well, and water types like Blastoise and Clawitzer, which, to be fair, they get hit by Wild Charge pretty hard, but you know, defensive Blastoise is gonna live that, do some damage back, potentially burn Klinklang with you know, a Scald Burn, or even just click Yawn on it. And yeah, Klinklang just doesn't really achieve much in the long run, which is a shame, to be honest. Again, it's my favorite Steel type of all time. I wish it was in a lower powered metagame. I do think Klinklang would have gone hard if it literally didn't have other Steel type competition, or just the general like base stat total of the tier wasn't that high. But yeah, that's why Klinklang is my number 4 choice. At number 3, we have another Steel type Pokemon here in Doublade. Now, Doublade, I'm gonna say, is worse than Klinklang, just because of the fact that Doublade's like roll, at least I could say with Klinklang, oh, I can use it as a shift gear sweeper. It might not be a consistent sweeper, but I know what it's gonna be doing. Doublade's role in this format is like, I don't know what he's doing here. Like, I really don't know what he's doing here. You could say, oh, Doublade has been known to be a very physically defensive Pokemon, you know, 150 defense, which is getting boosted by Eviolite, which is going to be his main item. It has a way of surviving something like Bishop's knockoff and using close combat to OHKO it back. But if the best thing you can say for Doublade is that, oh, it's going to survive one Bishop's knockoff and then OHKO it back with close combat, then, you know, that's not a good enough niche. You know what else can OHKO Bishop with fighting type moves? Honchkrow. Do you know what else can OHKO Bishop with fighting type moves? Emboar. Do you know who else can OHKO Bishop with fighting type moves? Blastoise and Clawitzer. So this niche of OHKO and Bishop after losing your most pivotal item and probably almost getting 2-hit KO'd, like, is that the best you can offer? Like, is that really the best thing you want to be using Doublade for? Like, I'm really wondering what is going inside the heads of people that actually think Doublade has a shot in this metagame. It doesn't. It pretty much loses to every single good Pokemon that everyone is using in the tier right now. Blastoise is gonna like nuke it because its Spadef stat is so low. You have Honchkrow, which again, like, I've been seeing some mixed Honchkrows around, so like Doublade's not even going to switch into a Dark Pulse very well. Sandaconda doesn't take any damage from Doublade and also just chips it down eventually, because as much as this defense stat is so high, only having 322 HP doesn't help you at all. I'll be honest, like, Doublade's HP stat is way too low for it to be a consistent defensive piece in the tier, especially when knockoff is common, and if it loses its Eviolite, that special bulk is practically in the negatives, and then like it's still gonna tank physical hits decently well, but the low HP stat does let it down a little bit. Loses to Rhydon, loses to Sinistra, loses to Dugtrio some ways, but obviously Dugtrio needs some chip on Doublade. Like, Doublade's not getting O-code, and then you just lose to CC. But you get my point. There's a lot of Pokemon in the tier that can handle Doublade, and you're just wondering, why am I using this as a defensive piece on my team when it loses to everything that's common? Like, it's a hindrance to your team. I think you're a mon down if you're running Doublade on your team, because I will say the only thing Doublade is checking reliably, and like, I'm really like holding on to the word reliably here, because I'm just like, a banded Stoutland with superpower could still end up 2-hit KOing a Doublade with choice band. But other than that, you know, this is probably the best Stoutland switching. And even then, you still have Houndstone. Houndstone is legal in this tier. Like, this already just sits on Stoutland completely. Like, Crunch is doing like 25 or even 20% just because Fluffy's a really strong ability. And this is a mon that doesn't have to run Eviolite. It can run Boots, it can run Cobra Berry to handle Honchkrow Bishop, and then Oko Bishop back with Body Press. Like, you don't need to be using an Eviolite reliant Pokemon. And the Steel typing actually doesn't really help out Doublade either. You're getting a Fire weakness and you're getting a Ground weakness compared to Houndstone, which, to be fair, also has that Fire weakness thanks to Fluffy, but isn't weak to Ground. So it ends up actually not losing to Sandaconda in a 1v1. So yeah, Doublade, not a really good Pokemon by any means. And yeah, I'm just going to have to say it's the third worst Pokemon in the metagame at the moment. At number 2, I think it was really a toss-up between my number 2 and number 1 pick, but I do have to say Ninjask is probably the second worst Pokemon in the tier. When you have Cypher in the same tier as Ninjask, it's never gonna really end well for you. And yeah, you could say Ninjask is the fastest one in the metagame, but if that's all it's offering, then you don't really need to have the fastest one in the metagame. Because even then, you have another bug type that's the second fastest mon in the tier, which is Excelgor. And Excelgor has 10,000 times more utility than Ninjask could ever hope for. You know, Excelgor has Final Gambit with a higher HP stat. It has both Toxic Spikes and Spikes. It has Yawn, it has Encore, it has Knockoff, and you know, similar to Klinklang, Ninjask is suffering from lack of coverage. Is covering lack of coverage issues. Like, I'm tweaking here, guys, sorry, but yeah, it literally only has U-turn and dual wing beat to its name, and its dual wing beat is weak as hell because it's not boosted by Technician like Cypher is. So Cypher, you know, slower Ninjask, but you know, has coverage, it has close combat, it has basically a Brave Bird and dual wing beat because of Technician, it has Knockoff, it has Trailblaze, which is also boosted by Technician. And this set ends up, well, if you remove Knockoff for SD, this is a very dangerous set because you can Trailblaze on Rhydon, for example. The Rhydon being chipped just slightly, and like, you get a +1 speed boost, you end up outspeeding most Scarfers. Because like a lot of the Scarfers are slower, and then you know, Cypher just ends up sweeping because dual wing beat is gonna Oko most things. So yeah, Ninjask just fails to really do anything in the metagame of note. His Final Gambit is worse because his HP stat is lower than Excelgor's. His speed is good, but at what cost? Like, I don't even think you can Oko max HP Ember with dual wing beat. That's how weak Ninjask is compared to Cypher, because Cypher has 110 attack, Technician boosted versus 90 attack with no Technician boost on dual wing beat. And yeah, I just don't really see much of a reason to use Ninjask in this metagame at hand. Even all of the other Pokemon that didn't make this list that I don't rate in the metagame whatsoever, like Samurott, Vigoroth, Guzzlord, even Stunfisk to a certain extent, they all can actually do something, and I've seen them do things on ladder or in other games that I've played versus other players. But Ninjask, this mon has not achieved anything of note in the last 10 days. Nothing. Ninjask has done nothing. But you know, it's still better than the number 1 pick, which is probably not going to surprise anyone. But you know, people are probably going to be surprised that I put Doublade at number 3. So yeah, let's move on to our number 1 worst Pokemon of the metagame so far. At number 1, I'm going to have to put Bellossom, unfortunately. Bellossom is in a pretty much the same case as Ninjask, where it's just completely outclassed by a much better Pokemon. And the Pokemon that outclasses Bellossom completely is Amoonguss. Now, Amoonguss is a very annoying Pokemon, especially when you take in Sleep into account, which is not banned in 35, and I hope it will get banned one day. I'm going to try and push it. But yeah, Amoonguss is a lot bulkier, has Regenerator, has that poison typing, which ends up meaning that Amoonguss as a grass type is not weak to poison type attacks. Bellossom's mono grass typing doesn't help it in the slightest, because like, You could say Amoonguss also struggles with the same Pokemon like Emboar, Honchkrow, Magmortar, for example. But at the same time, Amoonguss has Regenerator, has that poison typing, which gives it a lot more resistances, like to Fairy. It's not weak to Bug anymore, so it can actually take U-turns. It's also, it might be neutral to Ground, but the Ground types are afraid of Amoonguss anyway because it's that bulky and can actually do a good amount of damage back with Giga Drain, for example, to recover its health back. So you're probably wondering what Blossom can do. What can this Worstmon in the 35 October metagame do to somehow, you know, appease its fans, for example? Because there's going to be some people that are like, Blossom is probably not the Worstmon in the tier. They'll probably give it to Ninja, called Klinklang, for example. But, you know, this is the best set that Blossom has at his disposal. And please don't be shocked when I show you the moveset on this thing, because this is realistically the best thing it can do. So you have Swords Dance, a mon that is known for its quiver dancing shenanigans with Strength Sap in the lower tiers, running Swords Dance. To be fair, 80 attack is not bad. It's not bad by any means, but at the same time, for this mon to be running Swords Dance, you know that it's in the gulag. You know that this mon's not going to actually achieve anything. Because again, 50 speed is really not going to do much. It has Drain Punch for steel types. It has Triple Axle to hit grass types. And it also has Leaf Blade as consistent grass stab. And this is what Blossom does. This is all it can do. And even then, this is walled by Doublade. This is walled by Houndstone. This is walled by Emboar. You know, is walled, well, I'm not going to say it's walled by Cypher, but Cypher's going to kill you anyway with the Wing Beat, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, so this is the best that Blossom can do, and yeah, it's quite depressing, to be honest, because, like, the damage output is actually decent if you get a Life Orb plus Finger Attack, or maybe you could try and use Sun with this, but again, no one's trying it because it's not worth using. Again, like, this is not a mon that's doing anything in this tier, because Amoonguss outclasses it as a defensive grass type, Sinistcha outclasses it as an offensive grass type, and then pretty much every other offensive threat is doing something in this tier, and yeah, it's not Blossom. So yeah, that is it for my top 5 worst Pokemon list for the October 35 Pokes metagame. Hopefully you guys agree with my picks. If you don't, cope, I guess. But yeah, if you think Guzzlord should be on this list, fair enough. If Samurott deserves to be on this list, fair enough. But yeah, these are my 5 picks for the worst mons in the metagame. But yeah, thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.